Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Coleman, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation at NYU. I use she and her pronouns. I hope that everyone is taking very good care. We are thrilled to welcome you to our Transformation Talk series, where we spotlight leaders to learn from their journeys and to gain knowledge about how to be agents of change, working across our organizations. In OGI, we engage global diversity and inclusion principles with an intersectional focus on nimbleness, inclusivity, resilience, transformation, the growth mindset, design thinking, and adaptivity in all of our work. Transformation Talks is part of NYU's Be Together initiative, centered on innovating, acting, and transforming together. Today, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Vice Chancellor Mariët Westermann. Welcome, Mariet.
Hi, Lisa. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Mariët Westermann is the Vice Chancellor of NYU Abu Dhabi, where she oversees all academic, administrative, and operational affairs at NYU AD. Vice Chancellor Westermann is the former Executive Vice President of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, former Provost of NYU Abu Dhabi, and former Director of the NYU Institute of Fine Arts, and also art historian, and joined the NYU AD as Vice Chancellor effective August 1st, 2019. Westermann had been with the Mellon Foundation since 2010. And as I mentioned before, was the Executive Vice President for Programs and Research since 2016. In that role, she launched initiatives that studied and promoted the value of humanities and the liberal arts and strengthened community colleges, as well as encouraged graduate education reform and renewed preservation of cultural heritage around the world. She is an avid supporter of scholars and artists at risk. Prior to the foundation, she was on the faculty at NYU and was the first director, as I mentioned, of the Institute of Fine Arts. Before joining NYU in 2002, she was the Associate Director of Research at the Clark Art Institute. And from 1995 to 2001, she was an Assistant and Associate Professor at Rutgers University. She received her undergraduate degree magna cum laude from Williams College, where she was elected to the Phi Beta Kappa, and she received her master's and PhD from NYU's Institute of Fine Arts. Her principal areas of scholarly interest in the art of the Netherlands, she is widely published in the field, including A Worldly Art, the Dutch Republic, 1585 to 1718, and that was published in 1996. The Amusements of John Steen, Comic Painting in the 17th Century, 1997. And Rembrandt, Art and Ideas, 2000. And she has also edited 5 books, including Anthropologies of Art, 2005. She has done extensive work with museums, including the curator of the Hart and Oom, Dutch Interiors in the Age of Rembrandt, Denver Art Museum and Newark Museum, 2001, and numerous museum catalog essays. She is currently preparing an exhibition and book on the Renaissance of the Garden Eden in the history, theology, and art of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with significant implications for garden practice in these cultures. She has been the recipient of fellows, honors, and grants from a wide range of organizations, including the National Endowment for the Humanities, the American Philosophical Society, the Center for the Advanced Study in the Visual Arts, the Clark Art Institute, College Art Association, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She serves on the boards of the International Alliance for the Protection of Heritage in Conflict Zones and the Scholar Rescue Fund. And it is a pleasure and honor to have her as a member and colleague of our NYU senior staff. And I would just like to say, as a gardener, I am super excited about her forthcoming work. So let us jump into the questions and get started. So thanks again for joining us today, Vice Chancellor Westermann.
Thank you so much, Dr. Coleman.
I'd like to begin, as I do with each one of our guests, as an accomplished and globally respected leader and change agent. How do you define and think about transformation and progress within the context of global higher education?
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here and participate in these talks with you, which are themselves an innovation for NYU, Lisa. There are so many ways to answer your question, but I want to focus particularly on students because I still believe that there is no university without students. You can have, of course, very important research, and that is one way to think about transformation in global education as well. and you can't really have a research university without research. But you can perfectly well have research without a university, because it could be in a research institute, in industry, and in many other spaces. But you cannot have a university without students. And so I am highly motivated when thinking about the question of transformation, about the journeys of students. You can recruit students from around the world, as we do at NYU Abu Dhabi, and from the country, the UAE, and we do that as well, bring them all together. And of course, you select them for certain qualities that are likely to make the students succeed in your particular learning environment. That's very important. You want to match very well to the institution in a way. But then what's in the end much more important is not how students come in, but is how they leave and what they go on to do and how they feel about what they did. And I would say that the transformation that can happen on a globally diverse, resolutely international campus like NYU Abu Dhabi is that you see students develop to a great degree a sense of purpose. I think that is an important goal of undergraduate education anywhere, but it is especially notable in richly diverse, globally educating institutions. And when I talk about purpose, I don't just mean that you come out knowing precisely what you want to do. In fact, ideally, it's not too precise when you come out. But what I mean is a sense of purpose is a sense of yourself as a person in the world who has a sense of herself, of themselves, of himself, and can see a way forward to a meaningful life, a life that's both productive and that where one can succeed in terms of being a human being in any register and a member of society, but also a sense of purpose that takes you a little bit beyond your personal goals, whether your personal goals are to be a doctor or an artist or to work for an investment bank or for a tech company or to be a social entrepreneur or a teacher. Any of these things can be extremely purposeful things and are meaningful things in society, but thinking somehow that you can, that purpose that you have also contributes to society at large. And we know from research that most human beings, at least the ones in the West that have been studied, but for many diverse communities, don't develop such a sense of purpose until they are into their early 20s or something like that. So that education, and especially global education in that period from 18 into the 20s, is an especially critical period to achieve that. And I think that global education among such diverse communities of students really allows you to do that. And it is one of the reasons that what we find about our students by the time they leave, not only do they go on to great jobs and great graduate schools, and they do at very high percentages right away, 95% in fact by graduation, we also, what we really love about them is that they don't only want to do well, they also want to do good. And that's all about purpose.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for centering students, right? Again, we in higher education, I think it's so important that we remember to center students, and particularly when we're thinking about transformation, as you said, right? That not just the transformation process for them, but the transformation process that they bring for us into the institution,
Yes.
which leads us right into the second question, which is really about leadership, right? So if we, in our office, and of course in all offices across higher education, we work across all the fields, right? All the disciplines, and we're getting ready, getting these emerging leaders, et cetera, ready for the next step. So whether that's in the arts or the humanities, the sciences, et cetera. And so as you think about your work, not just as the Vice Chancellor, but also your work at the Mellon Foundation, tell us a little bit about some of the core strengths that you think are necessary for emerging leaders, for them to be ready for, right, this, as you mentioned, globally diverse world, for places like Abu Dhabi, right, and things that is this ever-changing world that we have certainly seen a lot of over these last couple of years, to be sure.
It's a wonderful question, and one we talk with our students with quite a bit, quite a lot. And I can distill them into a few terms, I think. A lot goes into leadership, and probably the very first thing is not thinking of yourself as a leader too quickly, but thinking that you can be one and strive for that. Not undershooting, in other words, but really knowing that being a leader is not just about getting a degree from a great institution and getting great grades. I mean, that's a good thing to do, and you can advance your work that way. But the real qualities that I think have helped me along the way, and I like to see developed in our students, are curiosity, true interest in questions that you might not already know, recognizing as well what you don't know as what you do know, and mastering what you know. With that curiosity comes an interest in others, in other human beings, and I hope also in other living creatures and living things. I think it's very important to develop a commitment to continuously developing your skills. Never think you're done learning because you have that degree. Degrees are important. They represent an achievement and a body of knowledge and a set of methodologies that you've developed. And that's really important. I don't want to knock it. But to actually flexible leadership, these qualities of flexibility, innovation, and resilience, adaptability that you mentioned in the introduction to the program, I think that's all about learning to learn and to continue to learn. Skills of hearing, really hearing others and not thinking that you already sort of know what they're going to say. Trusting the truth that others are telling you, that it is their truth, even if it may not be yours and it may be very startling to you. So asking questions of others, but also of yourself, being quite self-critical and sometimes asking, not self-critical for the sake of it, but really asking, did I really actually listen to this person or this community that just told me all these things that I didn't like to hear about something in my organization? That's all about curiosity and learning and trusting the truth of others. And basically what all those skills support and scaffold, I think, is this elusive quality we hear a lot, empathy. You know, empathy is really important, but it's actually really important to hard to achieve across the board with anyone you may ever meet. We know that about ourselves. We all come with inborn fears, anxieties that play out into biases, implicit or explicit. And I think that empathy, true empathy, is really born of these other qualities and fostering them and cultivating them and learning how to do that. So really being, and in all that, then you have to be open to stretch also beyond the discourse that you come from. So for example, in this whole realm of inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity, and also innovation, which is so important in the work that you do at NYU, knowing that those terms have a very particular valency in the US or the UK, in Anglophone society, you could say, but could mean something very different and even not entirely desirable to communities if you're in one like NYU Abu Dhabi, where we have students from 120 countries and faculty from 45 or more. You really have to adjust your frames and be willing to do that. And again, I think that's all about that curiosity and ability to keep learning.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for talking to us a little bit about sort of the science of empathy, right? What's behind it. And that is, I think, is so important in emphasizing, obviously, curiosity and learning, as well as the other components that you mentioned. And I think this notion of not the absolute truth, right? But and you can't hear, you have to get to someone else's truth by listening. So thank you. Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn a little bit to your leadership journey. And so I have this friend who talks to me a little bit about what would your 8-year-old self think of yourself today, right? And so we'll start with that question. So where would your 8-year-old self think, wow, I've done exactly what I thought I was going to do? Would it be a little surprised? Tell us a little bit about that 8-year-old Vice Chancellor Mariët Westermann.
That 8-year-old, was definitely curious, but of course couldn't ever have fathomed studying in the United States, living in the United States, changing fields of study. Europe was always a bit, I grew up in the Netherlands, as you said, and in study there was always a bit more confined, and you were sort of supposed to know by 18 what you wanted to be. And certainly at 8, I had no idea, but I was very curious. And I was very lucky because my parents supported my curiosity. So did my grandparents. I had real leaders in the family. You don't think of them as leaders, of course, but there were people who cared about me. They loved me, which made it possible for me to learn. I also think love is important, to be able to learn. And so they encouraged me, even though I was very, I went from one thing to the next. One day I wanted to be a painter. The next day I wanted to look at the stars and my father explained these things to me. And then I would help my mother garden. And then I wanted to learn to cook. And I think I did a lot of those things as a young girl and was allowed to mess around and fail at them a little bit, even though my parents also stressed sticking with things from time to time. They knew that I had this restless curiosity. And I think if you look at my career, you can sort of see that I have straddled fields. I have moved across fields quite a bit, but I think to me it still all feels pretty coherent as a set of learnings along the way and making use of opportunities that came to me and daring to take them on. So I think the little 8-year-old in me could never have seen any of this, but I believe that I was given a lot of the sources of confidence, even though I wouldn't have known it at the time. That is so important, I think, in an upbringing, whoever helps you gain it.
That's absolutely right. And thanks for emphasizing that important point about just the environment to learn, right? And the environment that is needed. So tell us a little bit about the arc as we think about your career. A lot of the people who will be looking at this, as you know, are students and emerging leaders. And so tell us a little bit about some challenge or challenges that you've had to sort of navigate as you think about the arc of your career. And also tell us about some of those moments that you're most proud of, or things that you did that you think, or in your case where you learned something, right, that you think was just really valuable. So
Yeah, those are very good questions, and I'm still thinking of that 8-year-old. And the biggest thing that I overcame in my life that could have been an enormous obstacle, and if I hadn't overcome it, I would never have done any of these things, starting with going to Williams College and certainly ending with sort of living and working in these different places I love. I had deep and profound homesickness as a child. And I think that that has something to do with the incredibly supportive environment. I know people have different views of that. Some people say, well, maybe I felt insecure about home, but I think it's the opposite. I really felt so well supported that it was sometimes scary to me to strike out. And I remember as an 8-year-old going to Girl Scout camp with my sister. Thank heavens my sister was with me for a week on this island in Holland. It wasn't very far away. It wasn't very long. But when you're 8 years old, 7 days where you're not going to see your mom and your own bed and your dad and your little brothers, just felt like an eternity. And I remember crying for the first 3 days straight. And really, I had the same thing going to a friend's house, to her grandparents who were so sweet. And so really, I had profound homesickness really until my late teens. I learned to overcome it. Its exposure helps you overcome challenges. And I could also see that that restless curiosity of mine wasn't going to go anywhere if I was just going to stay at home. So that was something to overcome. And learning at Williams, an incredibly supportive learning environment with really great friends. I was one of very few international students at the time. There were maybe 20 across this entire institution of 2,000 students. And as a Dutch woman, I was exotic, in Williams College. Nonetheless, these very wonderful American human beings who were very different from each other embraced me and made me overcome that homesickness. I think I came to see that I could flourish in a different environment. It is so important. And again, that's why global education, I think, is so important. And and I have great empathy, truly, that comes very naturally in this case, empathy with our students and faculty and staff who do have that pang of home sometimes. And I'm therefore very focused on making home for others. I think that's the thing that was really hard and critical to overcome.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. And so we're going to talk. This ties right into a lot of the work that you do, and I know this, which is around innovation. And so thinking about innovation and the role that it's played, right, in your work, both as the vice chancellor and in your former work, right, and you've done lots of things formerly. So talk to us a little bit about this space of innovation and the connections to your current work, and obviously to staying nimble, right, and to staying sort of present with this global, ever-changing world.
Yeah, staying nimble, open, and proximate to the causes you care about and the things, the purposes you want to advance, which for me is all about education and also helping the world see the beauty that of what humans have produced over time, the
Yeah.
beauty and the challenges in it, but that's all about cultural heritage preservation and having people see that everyone can have access to art and beauty in their lives, that it is just lying in wait. So that's some sort of my purpose, and education around that, and making sure that everyone can flourish in an educational environment. This is where innovation is very important, I think. And innovation should never be pursued for its own sake. It's another way of saying I'm staying open and nimble to doing things a different way. And that is a great source of resilience, one of those other qualities you mentioned. And since you asked about things that I might have been proud of on my journey. Well, I learned that pride was one of the seven sins when I grew up. So let me not use that word.
I think
But
we all learned that, right?
nonetheless, I do feel that I learned a lot about it, especially in the last, since kind of coming into these leadership roles that I never had anticipated for myself, because I really thought the academy was a wonderful place for me to be, just doing research and teaching and so forth. But one thing I really learned is that you have to be able to pivot and stay with the times and hope to see around corners at what may come next. And this is, of course, very difficult. So let me give the example of the pandemic. No one could really see around that corner. Maybe some epidemiologists could, but most people, for most of us, this was a complete shock to the system. And to some degree, there will be a long period of adjusting to it. But here is where I think my appetite for innovation helped me, and I hope it helped our community at NYU Abu Dhabi. We had to be from one week to the next totally open to doing things in new ways when all our universities had to go online within 2 weeks. And of course, we were well prepared in some ways at NYU Abu Dhabi to do that. But there were also just ways of beginning to be different as a community and stay open to that. So almost from the start, I decided that rather than have all these compartmentalized fora in which we discuss things, which is very typical of universities. You have faculty council, very important. You have all staff meetings, very important. And then you have, of course, student community town halls and sessions through student interest groups and student government. And I decided even before we all went into this kind of lockdown period in March, that it was very important for everyone in the community to hear the same things at the same time, especially when it came to what I was thinking about things and what my leadership team was doing, because there were so many rumors, there was so much fear and anxiety. And so we immediately began the town hall for all, the all university town hall. And you know what? We're never going to stop doing it. We may not have quite as many, I hope, as we did during the pandemic, but we had lots of them. And it was so good for everyone to hear the same thing so that faculty could hear what was on students' minds. And they would hear it individually, but they would hear it in the town hall and how we reacted to that, so that the staff knew that we didn't treat anyone any differently across the community when it came to keeping people safe and healthy, and keeping within that people moving forward academically. And the third, acting in solidarity with the country, the UAE, which was really doing a good job of putting in place health protocols. We could never have communicated all that as clearly if we didn't have this extremely rigorous and I think innovative communications protocol through town halls, videos, and also very weekly updates that were for everyone. So that was one innovation. And another was realizing that on a campus as relatively small and nimble, you see it here behind me, beautiful campus, our research labs are extremely high octane and accomplished. And so we figured out very quickly that we had one of these wonderful machines, of which there are very few in the region, called a fluidyme machine. I never heard of a fluidyme machine, but what a fluidyme is a new paradigm, literally, for quickly scanning samples for different kinds of presence of different substances or molecules or viruses or whatever it is on 24 different markers, very fast, thousands of samples a day. And as soon as we realized that we had a gold mine because we could start taking saliva samples from our community and also offer that service to thousands of community members across the UAE and help the country come up with better and quicker testing of the spread of the disease and therefore containing the virus, the infectiousness of it across the community. And I think that's all about innovation and staying really open to what is possible and being willing to put the resources of your university completely at the disposal of the broader community when that is needed.
Thank you so much. And thank you for identifying, right, the opportunities, because in so many cases, the pandemic, people were focusing on the negative aspects. But again, what you've shown is, and in your answer, is how we can use these moments that are seemingly surprising, right, as opportunities to create innovation and to learn, to go back to some of the earlier points about learning in that continuous cycle. So I can't believe we've come to the end, but this is my last question, which is, given your leadership journey, could you share a piece of advice or something maybe that you wish you had known earlier, or something that, and part of that is, again, we're emerging leaders, right? Things that maybe it's something that someone had told you. And then the other part of this, and we know that you like gardening, so we're going to ask you to talk about outside of that, is something that sustains you or gives you joy, right? Something that, you know, through the difficult times, as it were. So that's those are our last two questions.
I'm often asked, what would you wish that you had known before you got started on your academic or especially your leadership journey? And my answer is almost always, I think I was sort of blessed not to know too much because, who in their right mind would have tried to start a university in and of Abu Dhabi, in and of NYU, as an art historian with really relatively modest leadership experience? I think I had the hubris of relative youth to be able to do it and not knowing too much. But I'm so glad that I did, because it was a transformative experience. And to this day, NYU Abu Dhabi will be the initiative of my lifetime, even though I am incredibly proud of the work. I said proud of the work I did with so many people and communities while at Mellon. I could look across this entire landscape. I would say that what I wish I'd known a little bit earlier, because I think I came to the work too late, is precisely the work that you promote and that you do so well, and about which I've learned so much from you. And that is the work to make sure that in any one community in our societies, every human being can feel included, can feel they belong, and that they have an equity stake. And I think that to learn that, I would say, and to really inhabit that knowledge, I had to step outside my comfort zone at some point. And that really happened, although I always knew it was important, I didn't really feel and understand it deeply until I came to the Mellon Foundation and really was tasked to oversee the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship Program, along with all these other things I had to do. So I took the opportunity to learn and to undo my own prior learning. And there, to some degree, it was actually good I didn't know things, because I could ask innocent questions. I could ask somewhat ignorant questions, as in, why do we use the US Census? It seems so cut and dried and so crude an instrument. And I learned that, of course, you need something to measure, because what gets measured gets done. But what I learned from that was that when it came to charting diversity in our community at NYU Abu Dhabi, we needed to come up with new demographic models. And we've been doing it. We took the opportunity of the past few years during COVID of really working on that. So again, that innovation comes to some degree from a relative degree of ignorance. But I want to say that that work, coming to that, if I could have started it earlier, it would have been so great, because it's given me such great joy. I really love the learning of it. What I had to unlearn was that this wasn't only about me as a white woman being part of a justice agenda, which is very important. That is important. It wasn't just me giving something up. It was also something about me gaining friendships, gaining understandings, gaining knowledge, access to new ways of thinking that I had, by my enclosedness in a way, until I had to really grapple with these questions, I had denied myself too. So I would say to anyone who is listening to this, and especially our emerging leaders, embrace that work. It's noisy work, it's difficult work, they're hard conversations, but as Michelle Obama always says, run for the noise, run for the hard problems, because you'll learn more. So that gives me great joy. And then when I want to step away from it all, like you, Lisa, I get into my garden, and I don't just say what I would like to see in my garden. I get down there, I get in the earth, I reconnect with the earth we all stand, walk, sit, or lie on, that we come from, and that sustains us. And I must say that is an extremely great and sustaining practice for me, and one that gives me great joy, and also brings, I hope, beauty in the lives of some others.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. This has just been a wonderful conversation. And as I said earlier, it is delightful to work with you and be in partnership in this important work. And particularly as we think about global inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity, and access issues. NYU Abu Dhabi is one site where I think not only can we learn so much, but across, right, our NYU landscapes. So thank you, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that you continue to follow the Office of Global Inclusion for more transformation talks, as well as updates about our events, programs, and of course, get access to our many resources. And that, of course, also that you will partner with us as we continue in our efforts to advance institutional excellence. Thank you again, and please take very good care.